At 4:17 in the afternoon, 12 jurors sat silently behind a wooden door. Inside that room was a verdict that could destroy a man's life. And according to everyone watching the trial, there was only one possible answer: guilty. Daniel Mercer sat alone at the defense table. He was 43 years old, a successful businessman, a husband, a father. And for the past 6 weeks, the public had watched him become something else: a murderer. His business partner, Jonathan Reed, had been found dead inside a private office. The prosecution had photographs, they had financial records, they had fingerprints, they had a witness, and most importantly, they had Daniel's name written across nearly every piece of evidence. Daniel looked toward the jury. Not one juror looked back. His attorney leaned toward him. "Lawyer, Daniel, I need you to prepare yourself." Daniel swallowed. "Prepare for what?" His lawyer hesitated. "For the verdict." Daniel stared at the courtroom doors. Then he whispered, "Daniel, they're going to say guilty." His lawyer didn't answer, because he already knew. The jury had been gone for 26 minutes. Then the courtroom doors opened. Everyone stood. The foreman walked in holding a folded piece of paper. Daniel closed his eyes. But before the judge could ask for the verdict, the judge looked at the prosecutor, then at Daniel, and asked one question. "Judge, Mr. Mercer, why did you lie about being in room 814? Daniel's eyes opened. The courtroom went silent, because nobody had mentioned room 814. Not once. 6 weeks earlier, Daniel Mercer had walked into the courthouse believing the truth would protect him. It didn't. The prosecution's case had been carefully constructed. Jonathan Reed had been found dead at 9:40 p.m. Security footage showed Daniel entering the building. His fingerprints were found inside the office. His company had recently lost millions of dollars, and Jonathan had reportedly told someone that Daniel wanted him gone. To the public, it was simple. 2 business partners, 1 financial dispute, 1 dead man, 1 obvious suspect. But there was something the public didn't know. Daniel had not been Jonathan's only enemy. 3 days before his death, Jonathan had sent Daniel a message. Only 7 words. "If anything happens to me, don't trust them." Daniel never knew who "them" meant. And before he could ask, Jonathan was dead. Prosecutor Rachel Cole stood before the jury. Calm, confident, precise. She didn't need to shout. Her evidence spoke for her. She displayed the final photograph. Jonathan's office, a broken glass, a blood-stained carpet, a desk drawer hanging open. Then she turned toward Daniel. "Prosecutor, the defendant had motive." Another photograph. "He had opportunity." Another. "And he had access." She paused. "And ladies and gentlemen," she pointed toward Daniel, "he was the last known person to enter that office." Daniel's attorney immediately objected. "Last known." The prosecutor smiled slightly. "According to the evidence." The judge allowed her to continue, but one juror frowned. Juror number 7, an older woman named Margaret Hill. She had been unusually quiet throughout the trial, and she kept staring at one photograph. Not Daniel, not Jonathan, the office clock. The prosecution called its star witness, Thomas Avery, Jonathan's executive assistant. Thomas told the jury that he had seen Daniel arguing with Jonathan on the night of the murder. "Thomas, they were yelling. About what?" "Money." "Did Mr. Mercer threaten him?" Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Daniel's attorney stood. "You're certain?" "Yes." "You saw my client leave the building?" "Yes." "At what time?" "Approximately 9:15. The lawyer looked at his notes. "Are you sure?" "Yes." The lawyer smiled. No further questions. But as Thomas stepped down, juror number 7 continued staring at the courtroom clock. 9:15, 9:40, 25 minutes. The lawyer hadn't asked the most important question. How could Thomas know Daniel left at 9:15 if the security camera covering the exit had been disabled at 9:08? Daniel's attorney called a forensic accountant. The witness revealed something unexpected. Jonathan had been moving company money, millions of dollars, not into Daniel's accounts, into an offshore account, owned by a company nobody had heard of. The prosecutor objected, but the judge allowed the testimony. The accountant displayed the records. The money had been transferred over 14 months, and the final transfer had happened the night Jonathan died. The amount? $800,000. The account holder? A company called Northbridge Holdings. Daniel stared at the screen. He had never heard of it. Then something strange happened. The prosecutor stopped taking notes. For the first time in 6 weeks, Rachel Cole looked frightened. Daniel noticed. His lawyer noticed. And juror number 7 definitely noticed. The following morning, a woman appeared in the back of the courtroom. Nobody knew who she was. She wore a dark coat. She never spoke. She never looked at Daniel. She only watched the prosecutor. During the lunch recess, Daniel's attorney approached her. "Ma'am, do I know you?" The woman shook her head. "No." "Then why are you here?" She looked toward the courtroom. "Because somebody is going to be convicted for something they didn't do." The lawyer froze. "Who?" The woman reached into her purse. She removed a small envelope. Then she whispered, "Ask the judge about room 814. Before the lawyer could respond, she walked away. That evening, Daniel's lawyer investigated room 814. It wasn't in the courthouse. It was at the hotel, where Jonathan had stayed 2 nights before his death. The hotel records showed something strange. Jonathan had rented room 814, but another name appeared in the records, Rachel Cole. The prosecutor, Daniel's lawyer, stared at the document. There was more. Rachel had entered room 814 at 6:12 p.m. Jonathan had entered at 6:18, and Rachel had left at 7:03. Daniel was nowhere near the hotel, but the lawyer now had a problem. The trial was almost over, and the prosecutor had never disclosed the meeting. The lawyer confronted Rachel. She denied everything. "It's irrelevant." "No," he replied. "It's potentially everything." She stepped closer. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. What happened in room 814? Rachel's expression changed. Then she said, "Jonathan wasn't afraid of Daniel." She paused. "He was afraid of someone else." The jury returned to the courtroom. The judge prepared to receive their verdict. Everyone stood. The foreman held the paper. Daniel looked toward his wife. She was crying. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder. Then the judge noticed something. Juror number 7 wasn't holding her verdict form. She was holding a handwritten note. The judge frowned. "Madam Foreperson?" She stood. "Your Honor?" "Yes?" "We have a problem." The prosecutor immediately objected. "Your Honor, the jury has already deliberated." The judge raised his hand. "Let her speak." Juror number 7 looked toward Daniel, then toward the prosecutor. "We believe there is evidence that was not presented to us." The courtroom erupted. The judge demanded silence. "What evidence?" She slowly lifted the note. "The office clock." The prosecutor's face went pale. The juror continued. "It was stopped at 9:08. Daniel's attorney stood. "So?" Juror 7 looked directly at him. "That's when the security system was disabled." Silence. Then she said, "And that's when somebody entered the building." The judge ordered an immediate recess. Investigators reviewed the building records. At 9:08 p.m., someone entered through a service entrance. The security camera had been disabled manually. The access card belonged to Thomas Avery. The prosecution's star witness, Daniel's lawyer, stared at the screen. Thomas had testified that he left at 8:50, but the access record said otherwise. He had returned at 9:08 and left at 9:42. 2 minutes after Jonathan was supposedly discovered dead, Thomas was brought back into the courtroom. His confidence was gone. The judge asked, "Mr. Avery, why did you lie?" Thomas said nothing. Then he looked at Rachel Cole. The prosecutor stared at the floor. Finally, Thomas spoke. "I didn't kill Jonathan." Daniel's lawyer stepped forward. "Then who did?" Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. That's not good enough." Thomas swallowed. "But I know why Jonathan was killed." Thomas revealed that Jonathan had discovered a massive fraud inside the company. Millions of dollars had been stolen. But Jonathan wasn't the thief. He had discovered who was responsible. And he was preparing to expose them. The money had passed through Northbridge Holdings. But Northbridge Holdings wasn't a random offshore company. It was connected to a government contractor, and the contractor had been paying people to bury evidence. Daniel had unknowingly become the perfect scapegoat. His financial dispute with Jonathan made him believable. His fingerprints made him convenient. His presence at the office made him vulnerable. But someone had gone further. Someone had planted evidence. Someone had manipulated the timeline. And someone had convinced the prosecutor that Daniel was guilty. The judge looked toward Rachel Cole. "Ms. Cole?" She stood slowly. "I was given information." "By whom?" Rachel said nothing. The judge repeated, "By whom?" Rachel finally whispered a name. and Daniel's face went completely white, because it was the name of the man who had originally hired him. His own father-in-law. Daniel's father-in-law had been the chairman of the company. For years, Daniel believed he was mentoring him, but Jonathan had discovered something Daniel never knew. The company was nearly bankrupt. The chairman had been secretly moving money. Jonathan discovered it. He confronted him. Then he threatened to expose everything. That was why Jonathan had to disappear. But there was one problem. Jonathan had already prepared a backup, a digital file, a recording, a complete record of every transaction, and he had hidden it somewhere nobody would think to search. Room 814. The mysterious woman from the back row was finally brought into the courtroom. She was Jonathan's sister. She explained that Jonathan had contacted her hours before his death. He told her, "If Daniel is arrested, don't let them convict him." She had kept silent because she was afraid. Then she produced the final evidence, a small digital recorder. The courtroom listened. Jonathan's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this," a pause. Then they succeeded. Daniel closed his eyes. Jonathan continued, "Daniel didn't kill me." The courtroom became completely silent. Then Jonathan said the words that changed everything. "Look at the person who benefits when Daniel is convicted." The jury returned. The courtroom was packed. Daniel sat motionless. The foreman stood. The judge looked at him. "Have you reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." The paper was unfolded. The foreman looked toward Daniel. "On the charge of murder," a pause, "we find the defendant." Daniel held his breath. "Not guilty." His wife covered her face. The courtroom erupted. But the judge wasn't finished. He turned toward the prosecutor, then toward the police, then toward Thomas Avery. Finally, he looked at Daniel. "Mr. Mercer." Daniel stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge asked the question that had begun everything. "Why did you lie about being in room 814? Daniel stared at him. "I didn't." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You told investigators you had never been there." Daniel shook his head. "I had never been there." The judge looked confused. Then juror number 7 slowly stood. "Your Honor." Everyone turned. She pointed toward the evidence table. "There are 2 different room 814 records." The judge examined them. One showed Daniel had never entered. The other showed his key card had been used. The courtroom went silent again. Daniel stared at the record. "I don't understand." The judge looked at him, then at the evidence, then back at Daniel. And suddenly, the judge realized something. The entire trial had been built around the wrong question. It wasn't, did Daniel kill Jonathan? The real question was, who was using Daniel's identity? The courtroom doors suddenly opened. 2 federal investigators entered. Behind them was a man nobody expected to see, Jonathan Reed, alive. Daniel's face went pale. The jury stood in shock. The prosecutor dropped her files. And Jonathan looked directly at Daniel. "I'm sorry." Daniel could barely speak. "But, you're dead." Jonathan nodded. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. He looked toward the judge. They didn't want Daniel convicted. The judge frowned. Then what did they want? Jonathan looked at the courtroom. "They wanted everyone to stop looking for me." The judge leaned forward. "Why?" Jonathan reached into his jacket. He removed a photograph and placed it on the evidence table. The photograph showed 5 people standing together. The chairman, the prosecutor, Thomas Avery, a federal contractor, and the judge himself. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge stared at the photograph. Jonathan spoke quietly. Because this trial was never about Daniel. It was about finding out who would protect the people behind the crime. But if Daniel was never the real target, why was his identity used? Who was really behind Jonathan's disappearance? And why was the judge in that photograph? If you think you know the answer, you haven't seen the final verdict yet. Subscribe to Verdict Horizon. Because sometimes the truth doesn't enter the courtroom until everyone thinks the case is already over.